But today's our residential resiliency meeting and action team meeting, and we have a nice agenda today. We are going to have an introduction. As always, I will go through that. We will discuss our flood insurance program possibilities and some updates. And then we will move into our developing local workforce for repairs and prevention. We'll have a guest speaker on that one. I think it's Corey Gray from DC Water. We'll talk about our next round of green lit projects from our draft action plans so that we can kind of continue to progress with getting these action plans approved. And then we will end our meeting with some next steps, a little bit of homework, and we'll close out the meeting. So, as always, we'd like to go over how this task force began. It was established by the city administrator back in September 2021. This task force reports to the Deputy Mayor of Operations and Infrastructure. That's the DMWA office headed by Lucinda Babers. DC Water and DOEE are the co-chairs. That's Mr. Gaddis from DC Water and Director Wells from DOEE. We had our kickoff meeting in November of 21, and all the proceedings that we have with every meeting is open to the public. We make sure that all of the minutes and any kind of supporting resource documents are available on our website. That is dcfloodtaskforce.org. Again, it's dcfloodtaskforce.org, all one word. Next slide. So the schedule that we have established and we continue to follow is as such. We have our full flood task force meetings every other month on the third Wednesday. Our next meeting for the full flood task force will be on Wednesday, July 20th. We have action team meetings, which are basically subcommittees, and we meet every month. Today's meeting is our residential resilience. We meet on the second Tuesday of every month, and we also have our governance and coordination action team, and we meet on the second Friday of every month. Our final report for the Flood Task Force is going to be due this November of 2022. We will have an action plan for all of the 9 categories that we've been discussing thus far. And then we will have some follow-up that will happen after the final report is submitted and approved. And that will be a gathering that we will have annually to make sure that we're tracking the progress on all the action plan items that were approved, and we will continue to discuss budgeting and action plan priorities. So, as I said before, we do have 2 action teams, and they have 9 categories that they cover. Residential resilience, which is this committee's meeting today, we cover categories 1 through 4. And the governance and coordination covers categories 5 through 9. And that next meeting for the governance and coordination will be July 8th at 10:30 a.m. So we've been very intentional about making sure that the public has input in this process. And we've really done a great job of making sure that information is posted, that we follow up with the public, that the public has notification, and that the public is completely involved in this process. And we give pause to make sure that any public input is incorporated into our future discussion. So the DC's Flood Interagency Task Force is committed to ensuring that all voices are heard and the concerns of the community are not only heard, but they drive the final recommendations that will be presented to the city. So far, we've had 2 public meetings that were held in March and a little bit into April. The topics that we shared were flood risk, the concerns, insurance, which is the help and the resources that will be offered to residents in a flood situation. Public comments for the Flood Task Force action plans. We have 3 separate action plans that we will go through. We'll break them out into 3 groups, and there'll be a 1-month comment period for each of those action plan sections that we'll be approving. They start in July. We'll have another one in September, and the last one will be in November. To access any of the public meetings and all other info related to this task force, we will have that posted on the website, as I mentioned before. All the calendar, all the schedule is there. Any kind of resource or minutes, documents that you need, it's all posted for the public to engage with and also to correspond with us directly. Does anyone else have anything to share about the public input before I move forward? Okay, great then. So moving along, we have our next topic here where we'll talk about our DC flood insurance program and the possibilities for what's going to be planned and any updates. And I believe we have folks from DISB that will be participating and leading this conversation. Bill or Philip?
Thank you, Monty.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we at DISB have been busy developing some draft proposals for insurance and alternative risk financing proposals to address flood and sewer line backup issues. I will kind of lead the discussion as we kind of walk through them, but we have several people who actively participated in this on the call, Sharon Shipp, Philip Edmonds, Angela King. So they also will may provide additional insight into some of these proposals. You know, with insurance things, some of them are kind of complex. So, you know, I'll try to give you sort of a high-level description of them. Be happy to answer any questions that people have. I'm sure either me or one of the other DISB staff can do that. We've had a little bit of discussion with other task force members on it, but you know, I think these we would greatly appreciate, and the proposals would benefit from additional input from the action team. So generally speaking, we've developed 5 proposals so far. One of them is to outreach to increase public awareness of alternative flood assistance programs and to expand people's willingness to get flood insurance or related products. Then there are 2 proposals that are designed to expand coverage, and these are targeted at homeowners and renters policies. So one of them provides discounts for specific mitigation activities, and the other one expands the types of coverage that your homeowners or renters insurance policy must offer. Doesn't mean you have to take them, because there will be a cost for the additional coverages, but it would require the insurance companies to offer these coverages that are water flood related, and so and then we have 2 proposals to establish a program that provides remediation funds to low-income district homeowners and renters to quickly address damage caused by specific water intrusion events. So there's, as I said, these are 2 proposals. We probably don't want to move forward with both of them, although maybe we might wind up with some sort of combination of both of them as we go forward. But they are intended. There's 2 different ways to kind of address the same issue of getting funds to low-income homeowners and renters in the immediate aftermath of a flood, to help them address those kind of issues that need to be taken care of right away. So the first item is the outreach program. This is to increase awareness about the issues around flooding, increase the number of flood policies issued by private insurers, collaborate with other agencies, and you know, figure out ways to provide more flood insurance, to more options for flood insurance, and to try to ensure that more people get covered by flood insurance, whether it's the NFIP or alternative things, and then to establish a methodology to determine how effective the outreach is. You know, most notably, trying to determine whether there is an increase in the number of district residents who have coverage for flooding flooding risks. So I'll pause briefly there to see if anybody has any questions on that. I know this one is relatively straightforward. I mean, and obviously this doesn't get into the details of how we were going to do that kind of stuff, but I'll stop briefly to see if anybody has any questions or comments about things that we might do about the outreach program.
Maybe I'll just add real quickly, Philip, that
Sure.
you know, we actually plan on you guys presenting this at the July task force
right.
meeting as a an action plan to vote on and then go through the process. So this one in particular is further along than the other ones that we'll talk about.
Yes, this one. This is the This is the one that was greenlit some time ago, and so we are expecting. We do have an actual. We do have it in the action plan template, and so any comments or feedback, we can certainly make adjustments to it prior to the July flood task force meeting.
A question which others may too. It's kind of basic, I think. When you talk about increasing the number of flood policies issued by private insurers, so we know that the NFIP exists for most flood insurance. Do the private insurers also issue flood insurance? Or are they issuing NFIP policies?
So so there has been a push in recently to try to get more privately issued flood insurance policies. There actually are a number of already issued private flood insurance policies in the district. To date, I think those are mostly excess coverage above what the NFIP does, and for commercial properties, things like that. But there is ongoing activity to try to encourage the development of more private flood insurance options. There are some obstacles that make that a little bit difficult, but that is, there are some places where there is more private flood insurance being sold. To the best of my knowledge, we don't have a lot of, first dollar private flood insurance being sold currently in the district. Maybe Angela knows, has more specific information about that.
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon to everybody. Yeah, Phil, we do. It is actually increasing. There's a number of private flood carriers that are offering first dollar flood insurance in the district. I know Neptune is one of them. Zurich is another. So they do provide first dollar and also excess over the NFIP program.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions on outreach? Okay, then maybe we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so the next one is this is one to I think we got our titles and our bodies mixed up here a little bit. Sorry about that. So while this one says mitigation credit and policy enhancements, the two items discussed below are the mitigation program. So I'll talk about the mitigation program. So, the remediation program. So again, the department developed. We came up with two potential ways to provide quick source of funding for homeowners, low-income homeowners and renters after a flood happens, to allow them to do things like get the water out of their of their home, do any necessary repairs to keep more water from coming in, to do things to try to prevent mold and things like that from occurring in the in the home or apartment or whatever. So the first one is it's based on a program that's successfully being used in Rockville, Maryland, and another program in Norwood, Massachusetts, that provide grants. And the grants, I say grant-based program. The grants would actually be administered through either a reimbursement or a voucher-based system. So this program would offer an amount, for example, up to $6,000 in funds or services to address remediation expenses for qualifying low-income households. So the idea is that this is very similar, I think, but a more formalized version of what I think DC Water has done in some of the past floods, where they have provided funds to do remediation. This would be something again where for homeowners and renters who could afford it, they could just go out and purchase things or engage contractors to do the work necessary to protect their residents, and then submit the receipts for reimbursement, or if a homeowner or renter did not have the resources to be able to spend the money and get reimbursed, then there would also be a voucher option where they could get a voucher that could be used in exchange for goods and services related to remediation efforts. And this again would be a program that would be administered by the district government. The funding for the program would come 100% from the district government, and we would have to do initial analysis to kind of set both the eligibility requirements and the limits of funding. So I don't know if maybe I'll just go ahead and briefly describe also the second program, and then we can have a discussion about both programs. The other alternative for this to get quick cash to people after a flood would be a program where we engaged an insurance company to that would issue a master policy to the district government, and then issue certificates of coverage to qualifying low-income homeowners and renters. The certificate would be for a fixed amount, and that would be available to remediate flooding issues. We would contract with an insurer. There would be one insurer that ran this program. The district government would contract with this one insurer. The insurer would issue a master policy to the Office of Risk Management, and then again, every year there would be a review of like tax records or something to determine which homeowners and renters qualified for coverage, and then anybody who qualified for coverage would actually get a certificate of coverage. The claims would be paid whenever HCMA determines that a specific property suffered a flood loss. So in fact, in this situation, the residents would not even necessarily have to file a claim if HCMA determined that there was a flood loss in a particular property. That information would be relayed to the insurance company, and they could go ahead and issue a payment to the property owners. Given that this one is it would be a sort of an upfront cash payment, unrelated to the actual expenses necessary to repair the property or to remediate the property. There would have to be some kind of policies and procedures developed to ensure that the funding went to remediation and not for other purposes. But that's something that could be addressed as the program is developed. And again, we would have to identify the criteria, the low income criteria, and the policy limit based on, we need an analysis to evaluate those. Again, the funding would come 100% for this program from the district government, but in this case, rather than the district government paying funds directly to affected residents, what the district would do would be annually pay premiums to the insurance company for the master policy and the certificates, and then the insurance company would handle the administration of claim payments. So again, both of these programs have a lot more nuances and complications to them than what I just gave you right here, but I wanted to try to give you a high level overview of them. And so with that, maybe I'll first ask if any of the other DISB staff want to mention anything that I may have neglected to mention.
Phil, okay, this is Angie. Just wanted to double back on the program for storm remediation and the grant assistance program. It was also designed just to provide, to reimburse and insure the qualified homeowner for the deductible, co-insurance, and maybe any surcharge if that was so determined. So I just wanted to add that part.
Okay, thanks, Angela.
Yep.
Philip, I missed that. Was that Angela talked about the first one or the second?
The first one.
Okay, thank you.
I think it might be good to just pause here for a second and let this sink in a little bit, and maybe just if I'm looking at these, one key distinction here is that in the bottom line, in 1.7b, you get whatever amount we set. It could be 5,000. You just get it automatically, no matter what.
Correct.
But that's after HCMA does verification that there was damage.
Correct.
And when you are referring to HCMA, you're referring to the PICO mission, similar to what was done on September 10th?
I'll say that's expertise that I don't necessarily have. I know that HCMA did something in the previous flooding issues. And so, yes, I presume it would be something like that.
Okay, great.
Ramesia and Philip, hold that thought because that's a great opportunity that ties into workforce training also.
Yeah, Vermesia, do you have any thoughts or concerns about this? I mean, I think the idea is we are pointing to HCMA as the agency that could officially say that, you know, this property has been damaged. And if that doesn't seem feasible, you should let us know.
Hey, this is Melissa just chiming in. I think we'll have to check on that. There's one thing if it's just like a yes or no thumbs up, there's damage or not damage. It's a very different question if we're assessing damage or making any sort of financial statement about what exactly is needed. I think that would certainly be something that is out of our capacity. And then I think that my bigger concern is whether the agency would be taking on any liability in that assessment.
I think, and maybe Philip, you can jump in here, but the only liability that I see is that we would, you know, if you over count, well, not even over count, if we just say a lot of properties have been flooded, then the next year when we get our premium payment from the insurer, it will be higher. So it's not a liability, it's just, you know, the market forces responding to what the information we give it. But Philip,
I assume that was more the idea that what would be the potential impact if you did not determine a property had a covered property had flood damage and they decided to sue or something like that.
Yeah, that or if like the damage is not visible and then something were to go wrong and we were on the record saying that there was no damage when there was.
So could we talk through this with our individual assistants? Because this could tie into that and just make sure that it kind of connects to that potential work that we do on the federal assistance side. Because we do our recovery individual assistants which the district has not had one of those requests since 2003. I think that would be helpful for action 1.7B to kind of walk through the thought just to make sure that it falls in line with that existing process. Just to make sure that, because that process has been something that is mirrored in our public assistance support that we provide through like such efforts like the COVID relief. So we kind of want to make sure that we have that level of assurance in that way. So is there a way we can kind of make sure the right people are on the call just to go through that line in more detail?
Sure, I think that would be great. Again, you know, one of the problems about this obviously is there's, you know, well, these are insurance programs and we sort of insurance related programs and we kind of created them. We know insurance, but we certainly do not know all of the other related impacts of this. So that's those. I mean, these are all great questions. And I think the proposals would benefit from additional discussion to make sure that we have them as good as possible before we expose them for comment, you know, at a future flood task force meeting, because while there's obviously still some opportunity for change there, as much of the technical details as we could nail down ahead of time, the better the proposals will be.
And Ramesia, Melissa, Philip, just to give you a little bit of experience we had with the backwater valve, similar issue. We did not have the manpower to send out to verify if they were flooded. We relied on the homeowners to send us documentation, photographic documentation. A lot of people sent us video documentation of the flooding, and we used that in lieu of sending people out. So you start dispatching people, it gets very complicated. Cost, time, plus you're entering people's homes. So there's different ways to do this. I don't know if it falls within the structure you're setting up, but you don't necessarily have to visit in person.
Yeah, we understand. Yeah, we understand that. A similar process is done through individual assistance when we have such a event of that large scale. So there is some checks and balances, but I think I might have misheard Philip, you sharing just kind of like the timeline as far as how the funding is being released. And so we kind of want to just understand the intent, see how that could be integrated, how that would best integrate into the individual assistance program, which would really help us to understand truly what the needs are for these smaller events. So I think it's great to have this conversation in more detail with Russell Gardner, who has been our lead when it comes to public assistance, but then also individual assistance.
Okay, and I will say, I think this may have been your question earlier. We would, there's not really we wouldn't really require anybody to do a loss adjustment. You wouldn't, certainly we wouldn't want to put the burden on you to determine whether the amount of a loss, because that's the reason why it's the reason why there was an idea for a fixed payment amount. But there would need to be a sort of a determination that the loss was sufficient to require some remediation. That would kind of be the standard that would need to be determined as to not. Because frankly, in a lot of these cases, the actual losses could be significantly higher and covered, even covered by maybe a homeowner's policy or a flood insurance policy. But that, there is some potentially some lag in getting that. So the idea of these programs is to get money to the residents, as quickly as we can after the actual flooding occurs, to allow them to make the remediation necessary to make sure that it doesn't get any worse.
Yeah, these were questions that our operations teams were, if we had a level of resource at that time for September 10th, we're making those kind of assisting residents with these tough decisions. So I definitely think that if we can connect more on this layout, that'd be great. But I appreciate you sharing this information, and we can set it up based off of your availability.
Okay.
Just to be clear, also there can be legislative fixes around liability. So I don't think that there's really any liability. This is Jed Ross for all. I don't believe that there's any liability for HCEMA or any other agencies. Doesn't mean that people can't bring suits or complain about certain things, but I don't believe that will actually really come into effect. But also, if we legislate around any of these programs, we can be explicit around exclusions of liability as well. Just two thoughts.
Thanks, Jed. And that brings up another point that I guess I could have mentioned earlier. For all of the insurance-related ideas, except for probably the outreach idea, they would require legislation. So I don't think any of these things are things that we currently have the authority to do. So the first an early step in this process would be to do legislation, and that may be, to the extent necessary, we may want to address some of those issues in the legislation.
And then,
This
maybe
is
after.
Victor, real quick.
ahead,
I just wanted to add that what is being discussed in terms of the district going out to do to collect information to determine the level of remediation needed is very similar to the effort and level of agency coordination that's needed with the substantial improvement assessment process, which is a required process that the district will at some point have a model for. So in other words, like if we already had that program stood up and had an SOP for it, it's almost the exact same type of response that's being explained here, collecting the same type of data. So if we continue to move on along this thinking, it might be good to look at what we're thinking about in terms of doing those substantial damage assessments, because there's probably going to be some overlap.
That's a good point, Victor. And just so everyone knows, the district is required to do these substantial damage assessments after a disaster declaration, right? That's the trigger for when we do those.
No, it's
Nick,
not after a declaration. It's after any damage to any of the properties within the floodplain. And so, for example, after the September 10th flood event, we did that to basically, because what we want to know is when those property owners come in for permits, did they suffer a significant amount of damage that would trigger higher regulatory actions on their permit? So yeah, it's not necessarily after a disaster declaration.
Hey, Victor, what about properties not in the floodplain? Like after September 10th, there were several properties that were damaged that were nowhere close to even the 500-year floodplain.
So that requirement to do the substantial damage assessment is just limited to the special flood hazard area, just the regulated 100-year area. So not outside that area.
But what I think Victor was also saying is, if we have a standard operating procedure that, for FEMA applies to the regulated floodplain, there's no reason we couldn't just take that same procedure and say we're also going to do it in any other area of the city.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And it's just, and so there's that, and then there's the damage assessments that are done. And what our team and HSEMA have sort of begun to realize is that, so we don't want, during an event, one resident being contacted to provide access for the district to get the same information over and over again, right? And so the idea is that if we know that there's one set of information that can be used for the substantial damage assessments, for the damage assessments, and then maybe a remediation program that the agencies coordinate so that the staff that go out are collecting all that information and distributing it to the agencies accordingly. So I know we haven't made a decision on whether to go forward with this, but I just wanted to put that there so that for added context to what's already sort of in motion.
No, this is good, and this is where a discussion is very helpful from everybody. From after a flooding, I think we've got 24 to 48 hours before they need to start drying out, before they start having mold growth. So it's going to be very important to be able to get some kind of relief to the homeowners within a short period of time. So depending on how many people are impacted, it's a resource issue also at the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
to Soliel's point, Nick, I think there's a big conversation around getting a bunch of vendors on board and making sure there's training and there's the ability for people to get those responses. Those vendors to come and do remediation will be an important factor. One thing I did want to point out, and I know Soliel, you had mentioned around the videographic evidence. Obviously, it's an important element to ensure that we are protecting against fraud as much as we can. So just figuring out ways for those protocols and checks and balances to be in place, photographs that actually show the address, and then, the brick structure, and then you can get to the photos that show the brick. So people aren't lifting photos from other things from the internet or what have you in order to make claims, or just at least the fear of audit. And then of course the language around filing faulty claims of the district can be criminally penalized and pursued and things of that sort. So I just wanted to put that out there. A, things to include on the legislation, and B, to make sure it's getting tracked globally in terms of how we're preventing fraud and abuse from any programs.
Absolutely.
And then just to, I think Judd made a point about, having vendors and others ready to do the remediation work. That, I'll say, that kind of fits in nicely with the idea of the other 17A, where there is a voucher-based system for low-income residents who can't, who don't have the money to expend resources for remediation and then get reimbursed. That there would be an option for vouchers, which would require some sort of pre-organization with presumably stores and contractors who are able to, who have the supplies and who have the abilities to do what's necessary for remediation, so that we can get, so that that could be something that could be handled rather expeditiously.
Yeah, thank you. Can I also add something to the conversation? This is Angie King. First of all, I just want to do a point of clarification for Action 1.7B. And to my understanding, there was the insurance company has a great part in that particular program would be doing the adjusting. So if I'm not wrong, Phil, did you factor into your program, wasn't the insurance companies sending out their adjusters and actually adjusting? Oh, okay. Okay. So I misunderstood that. Okay. Just wanted to get a point of clarification. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Great discussion. Thank you for the work, Philip, and your team.
Sure. And I just want to make sure. So, are there questions? Because I know, again, both of these I think are potentially viable things that probably need more discussion as we work through them. So maybe it would, if we have time, which I think we do, Nick, before we move on to the other ones, or Monty.
Yeah.
The first one, 17A, would require is something where the issue, the reimbursements or issuing the vouchers would be something that that would be administered directly by the district government. And so maybe it would be worthwhile to have a little bit of discussion about that. Angela, I don't remember off the top of my head, but did we identify a particular agency that would that we thought would handle the reimbursements or the vouchers?
Yeah, I thought it was DC Water.
DC Water?
So
Okay.
I thought it was
So
DC Water that we had identified. So
okay.
yeah.
So Salil, maybe we could you know, you could discuss a little bit about that side of it, if that's something. I mean, it is obviously you have done some of that, not necessarily exactly this, but you have run some sort of more, I think, ad hoc kind of programs in the past.
We did for the September 10th storm. We did not hand down any money. We had contracted with 2 cleaning companies to come in and provide services up to $5,000 to dry up homes that were flooded. And the other program was where we would pay for the installation of a backwater valve if they provided documentation they were flooded on that particular day. And yes, there's always a question. There were several people that we declined to provide backwater valves because they couldn't provide any documentation. And that's always a sticky point because they didn't have any prior information that they had to provide that documentation. So a structured program is very helpful. But those are the only 2 options we looked at.
So
We did not-
is there a
Go ahead.
limitation on why those payments could not come from a district agency?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Okay, so if the money is coming from a district funded program, is there a reason that can the payments come from a district agency?
They do right now, Meredith, on lead service lines. DOE manages the funding. I think they send the funding to us.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think the question is for DASB. You all identified DC Water as being,
DCO. We consider DC Water part of the district government, generally speaking. But yeah, I don't think. I mean, there's no. We don't know enough about the. You know, this is, I think, beyond our expertise. But if there's a more appropriate place for the payments to come from, then if there's not, we're not trying to say there's any prohibition on that.
yeah, okay, that can be worked out later.
Okay.
Yeah, but it realistically, it should be either DOEE or ORM is probably the more effective methodology. DOE issues grants all the time, ORM makes payments to claimants for losses all the time, whereas DC Water has separate ratepayer monies, which is a separate matter. So I think it's a good point. It probably should be a district agency whose budget is directly funded by district taxpayer dollars, unless the DC Water is going to be using ratepayer monies for it, which I know we probably won't be advocating for as a DC Water board member. And as the director of the district, I would imagine if this becomes a council and mayoral initiative, it would be probably better for it being one of the district agencies to be administering, or even HCMA, who also works on grant programs as well.
Okay, so not that speaking is volunteering, Jed, but should we change that to ORM?
Phil, can I just make another point, just to get another clarification and kind of just
Sure.
to address Meredith's question? I don't know that we really focused on who would be the funder of the program more so than the administrator of the program. And from what I believe we researched, that DC Water had administered a program similar to this, but I don't think we really touched on the funding. So I don't know if the administration and the funding go hand in hand. So I'm not clear about that too much either, but I just wanted to put that out there.
They always.
This is Barbara from DC Water, Assistant General Counsel. And I would have to say I completely agree with the Chief Risk Officer, Mr. Ross. We are independent. And so any type of financial obligation or decision would absolutely need to come from DC Water, our board, and that's completely separate when it comes to these types of matters. I think there is probably an opportunity for partnership and maybe even data sharing about our experience and what we were able to see and, you know, other opportunities to kind of share, but I don't know that there's a financial path on this. And so I did want to make sure that that was clear as we're kind of peeling back the onion.
Thank you.
Yeah, so
And
just
sorry.
Bill,
Go ahead.
to Angie's question. So typically they have to go hand in hand, and that whoever's going to administer has to have the funding, and they should have the funding. You know, there is always a possibility that one of the agencies could be given the job of doing all of these tasks, and then they give an approval and they refer that over to the other party, and then they just issue payments based on the legislation or what have you. But it gets more and more complex. Obviously, it's always easiest to simplistically lay out the matter and say who's going to do what. If this becomes funded, most likely it's going to be funded from the, you know, from the mayor's budget. In which case, then the funding would flow to an agency under mayoral authority. And so that could be any of, you know, DOE, HCMA, or ORM, I would say. Again, all agencies might play a particular role. I think a lot of those nuances need to get worked out. HCMA is the one doing the validation or not. Is it DC Water could even be doing that? Validation is fine, but then actual administration of payments, you know, that needs to fall to a mayoral agency. As it relates to ORM doing it, I mean, it depends on the scope. So if it's, you know, we're talking about 20 people issuing payments, we do that now, that's not a problem. We're talking about 200 or 300, and we're checking boxes to validate things. We have to get, generally, whenever you're making payments to residents and citizens, you have to get W-9s to ensure that those individuals don't owe taxes. So when we make payments to claimants, individuals who stated that the District of Columbia somehow caused them harm through negligence, we actually might agree, okay, we damaged your car, we owe you $2,000 for the repairs that you incurred, but then find out that that individual owed $4,000 in income tax or had outstanding parking tickets. And the OCFO will withhold those payments and take those monies and apply them towards outstanding liabilities that the district is entitled to. So whether we're making that an exemption and that's not actually going to be a requirement, that has to be handled legislatively. Otherwise, we're issuing taxpayer money to third parties who owe taxes. They wouldn't be entitled to it. So I just, you know, there are a lot of nuances that have to get worked out. But all agencies, you know, like I said, HCMA, DOE, and ORM all could do that. We all work with our agency fiscal officers in order to issue payments to third parties or issue grants, whatever that might be. And we go through the appropriate processes with our agency fiscal officers in the OCFO. So,
Okay, well, thank you for that, Jed. Thank you, Jed.
Would the same thing apply if it were vouchers and reimbursements?
the answer is yes. However,
Okay.
you can establish the program through legislation to exempt it.
Okay.
So, you know, that would be DC Council saying we're going to help, you know, low-income residents and homeowners. And even if you owe parking tickets, you know, it's better for you to be able to stay in your home, and we're not going to withhold payments for you in order to have a stable life, in order to whatever. But ultimately, if somebody owes $600 in parking tickets, theoretically, they shouldn't be getting all this money if they're not meeting their obligations to the district taxpayers, right? But it's a policy decision, and it has to be handled from a legislative perspective. Otherwise, the OCFO and the district will not issue monies to third parties when they owe money to the district. I mean, that's just good public policy and the current public policy. So yeah, that has to be decided and worked out depending on people's obligations.
I think, thank you for that, Jed. And excuse me, Phil. I think that's why we hadn't really determined qualifying, who would be qualifying for the low income households to actually be a part of the program. So that was a question that we kind of did leave open for the very reasons you're bringing up, Jed, and I thank you for that. But it would have to be determined who is qualifying as low income and qualifying a qualifying household. And they could, so that would, definitely have to be looked at later.
So can I do it just a little time check? How much? I feel like we're running out of time. Do we have time? Do we still have
Philip,
time
you have
to
about
discuss the other ones?
Philip, you have about 10 minutes. So great job
Okay.
on doing the time check. We have about 10 minutes. So I think we can probably bleed over maybe to 15 max, and we can shorten up some things at the tail end. Okay.
Well, maybe. I mean, we have a couple more items to discuss. So unless anybody objects, maybe we can move on to those other two proposals, which I think will not engender the same level of discussion. I think this has really been helpful discussion, and obviously it's just starting additional discussion that we will need to have about these things. But so if nobody objects, we'll move on to the other two. And again, these are hopefully much less complicated. So 19A is the district establishes a water intrusion mitigation credit premium discount program. So this very simply would be a program that would require insurers to offer premium discounts upon verification that an insurer that a policyholder does one or more of the following specific risk mitigation actions: installing water shutoff devices, water leak sensors, or water backflow devices. So this is, again, would be something that we would do by legislation that would require the insurance companies to give a discount. Some do this already, for some of these things, but this would mandate it. The legislation could either mandate specific discounts for various things, or leave that up to the insurance companies and our review of their rate filings to evaluate the appropriateness of the discounts. And again, the idea is if you did all three, you'd qualify for 3 discounts. This is similar to things that you may have seen otherwise in your insurance, like for your homeowners insurance, you probably get a discount for having smoke detectors or fire extinguishers or stuff like that. Those are not mandated discounts. Those are things that the insurance company just offers. The thing that I can think of off the top of my head, the other discount that we currently mandate in the district is for automobile insurance. There is legislation that if you take a driver safety course, the insurance companies have to give you a discount on your premiums as a result. So, but this would be sort of like that. So I think this is relatively straightforward, but I'll open it up to see if anybody has any questions on that. And again, this would be for your homeowners or renters policy, and this would not be limited to low income DC residents. This would be available to any DC resident.
Great idea, Philip.
Okay. And then the second one is again, it would be a requirement that insurance companies make available enhanced water damage coverage. So as I think I mentioned earlier, this would require insurers to make available endorsements to enhance insurance coverage. To be clear, these endorsements would very likely have an additional cost to them, and it would be the purchaser's, the policyholder's option whether they wanted to add the specific items, but they would have to be offered them. And these are things, there's a whole bunch of these things, and for mold coverage, for damage caused by water overflow. I'm not going to read all those things. You can read those for yourself. There are several different ones mentioned, and again, each would have its individual cost, and the proposal would also require the insurance companies to post these optional coverages and their cost, so that policyholders, when they are looking for insurance, can easily identify, what these are and what they cost. And again, some insurance policies now may offer some of these benefits already in the policy, but if they don't, then they would have to offer them as optional coverage with an additional premium. And again, this one also would apply to homeowners and renters policies, and it would not be limited to low-income residents. It would apply to all residents. And as I said before, both of these proposals would, as with most of the insurance things, would require legislation to put them into effect.
Philip, both of these can be done, right? As opposed to 1.7, this is not either or.
Correct. Both of these can be done. These is not two ways of addressing the same thing. These are distinct. Things that can be done.
And Philip, in practice, what this means is if I am shopping for homeowners insurance and I get a quote, that quote at the end of it will have a list of things that I see here with like additional, how much an additional annual premium it would be.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But the change here is that it would now be required on any time you're offering a homeowner insurance policy, you would also have to be offered, or you would also have to offer the customer these options.
Correct. Along with the price, so that everybody could evaluate whether they wanted to add this coverage and at the additional cost to their policy.
Right.
Well, I'm not very familiar with insurance. I want to.
Join the club, Salil.
My next comment here.
Well, now you are. We're all we're all experts now. I mean, this has been thorough. It's great.
This is awesome. Is it possible for an insurance company to deny coverage if a homeowner does not follow regulations? And I'm referring to like backwater valve is a requirement. There are several homes out there that did not install it. Just go ahead.
So the insurance company, I mean, absent a law, insurance companies underwrite policies to their standards. So if that district's law requires backwater valves and a home does not have a backwater valve in it, the insurance, I mean, the way it is now, an insurance company would underwrite that home, and they may treat them differently for not having a backwater valve. That depends on their particular standards. If we had a law that that addressed what insurance companies are supposed to do with regard to backwater valves, then they'd have to follow that law. I don't know if that helps, Salil, but right now we don't have a law, so it really is insurance company underwriting standards as to what they do if they find a home in the district without a backwater valve.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
So there were a couple of things put in the chat. I'm just not sure how far back you guys have addressed things, but I just wanted to make sure these questions were answered. Formicia dropped some information in the chat. That's a link. And then we had a question from Opera asking if the fund, what if it's a fund that certain entities pay into? I'm not sure if you guys covered that completely or not. Philip?
I'm not sure I understand the context for that question.
I'm sorry you guys were talking, so I didn't interrupt you guys. It's kind of hard to interrupt when you have a full thought like
Sorry
that.
about that.
Opera, if you wanted to restate it, come off mute and restate your question just to make sure it's answered, because it'll benefit everybody.
Thank you, Monty. It had more so to do when we were discussing kind of who would be the primary, how would the actual fund for the insurance be funded actually. I know we talked about administratively who would handle it, but who was actually going to pay into it. So we did say district funding, which is, I think, kind of the answer that we just give to things. But I was wondering if there was more, maybe a public-private opportunity that we could bridge here as well when it came to the funding aspect of it.
You know, I don't know that we could certainly investigate whether there was some opportunity for funding sources other than the district government for this, for either of the two programs. You know, either whether it's a grant or whether it's an insurance policy. I'm skeptical that there are long-term options for either of those. There might be short-term options to assist, but that's something that I don't know enough about. But that's certainly something that we could try to investigate.
All right. Well, thank you, Philip. There's one other question from Joshua, asking about is this essentially all hazard insurance? And then he does mention that all hazard insurance, regardless if it's in a floodplain, or would it pay out if it's in a floodplain or not? So I don't know if you have the answer to that, or maybe someone from ORM.
So you know, it would. I mean, I think these things, and Angela could probably answer this better than I could, but these are, I mean, the items, I think this is talking about the enhanced coverage option. So those tend to be things that you know, at one point in time may have been covered under a homeowner's policy. And again, some homeowners policy may still cover some of these now. But as insurance companies look at rising premium costs and ways that they can reduce premiums, you know, they may have eliminated some of these coverages. So this would sort of move back towards an all hazard kind of policy. But it would do so again at the option of the insured.
Great. Thank you, Philip. So I think that's it we have time for right now. This was wonderful, thorough as usual. Still, we have more to talk about. When we were preparing for this meeting today, we were talking about doing this in like phases. So this is part one of the conversation, and it's a to be continued. So it's a little bit of a cliffhanger, but we will get back to that in a future meeting. Corey Gray from DC Water is going to talk to us about developing the local workforce. We have been talking about how there's a lot of opportunities for inspection as well as installation and repairs. And so this is kind of the beginning of how we should be thinking about this as individual agencies, as well as a task force collective. Corey?
So Monty, I'm going to tee Corey up. If you go to the next slide. So this ties well with Philip's presentation. We did not rehearse this. But there's three categories. The immediate relief after flooding. This is something we found out after September 10th. There just aren't enough companies out there that can have the workforce to go out and clean every single house. So it's an opportunity. And in the discussion, we had the preceding discussion, there were several other opportunities that came up for local workforce training. I'm going to stop here and let it go to Corey, who's going to talk about it. He's had a passion about doing this and has done this very effectively for DC Water. So Corey, all yours for the next slide, please.
Sure. So first, good afternoon, everyone. And let me just tell you, I have been really enthralled with this conversation. Like Salil said, I didn't know much about insurance, and so I've been learning a lot as I've been able to sit through this. So thank you, Salil and Opera, Barbara, and Monty, and everyone for even giving me the chance to speak today. So what we were talking about and what I was asked to kind of walk through is the DC Waterworks program, which is our response to creating jobs on our projects and really connecting local and district residents, particularly those in wards 5, 7, and 8, on the opportunities that have presented themselves with DC Water. We started the program in 2016. It's actually, we call 2016 the summer of discontent at DC Water. As some of you all are aware, our general manager does the town halls. We goes out to the community. Usually we're talking about rates and just kind of understanding, getting feedback from the community as to what's going on. And in 2016, one of the things that we were constantly asked about were the jobs. With all the projects that were happening and all the things that were happening at DC Water, what were we doing to create opportunities for local residents and certainly those ratepayers who were investing in so much of the work at DC Water? So we started the Waterworks program, which in fact has two parts to it. One is just the creation of jobs and connecting local and district residents with those ready to fill jobs that we know are coming, that are being created by our contractors. We average somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 and 125 new jobs each year. And so we just wanted to be able to place individuals within those opportunities. There is a goal for us that 75% of all the jobs created will be in fact filled by local residents. DC Water, we become what's called the referral source for those opportunities, whereby contractors have to give us 3 business days to find talent for recruitment. We in turn will connect with our strategic partners, which includes DOES, Employment Services, MORCA, and a number of other not-for-profits to help us to find talent that's ready to fill. And we will place everything from administrative positions all the way up through skilled laborers and even management. We've done work with that. Since 2016, I think we've placed somewhere near 500 residents in jobs with our contractors. We do support them beyond just getting the job. So there is wraparound support that we provide. Each position that we place, each person has a case manager, a DC Water employee, or one of our strategic partners that's helping us. We do provide other support such as childcare and transportation support as necessary. But one of the things that we discovered is, and I think everyone on the call probably appreciates this, is that a goals-only approach is not going to work. In a situation where we're placing jobs, and I should have said this before, but all of our jobs are paying prevailing wages, right? So we don't have any entry-level jobs, even with our contractors. Everything is either Davis-Bacon, prevailing wages on Davis-Bacon, or prevailing wages under the Service Contract Act. And so the contractors, as they're agreeing to work with us, have said, gosh, DC Water and Corey, we love the program, we love the idea, but if you're going to give us talent that we have to place, they have to come with some skills. And just an interest in a job is not enough, but certainly they have to have an interest in the type of jobs that we're doing, and then they have to have some skill set to support the work that needs to be done. And so what we've done with that is we've created, as a second part of Waterworks, which is a skilled training program. And the skilled training program, it works just like it describes, where we're providing district residents up to 1 year of paid training and a certain skill set equivalent to the job that they're interested in going towards. And the way that works for us is at the beginning of each fiscal year, we do a survey of our contractors. We look at our procurement forecast as we're preparing for the Green Book, of course, to get an idea of what types of jobs are going to be awarded by DC Water in the upcoming year. And then we survey our contractors, the ones that have maybe incumbents or those that are likely to win or work with us, and get a sense of what their job needs are going to be into that coming year. And so from that information, we'll decide what type of skill training program we need to run, or cohorts that we need to run, and then how many participants we need to have, because we don't just train for the sake of training, but we're right sizing these trainings for the necessary jobs. And so there's a little diagram here that we have that kind of walks through what that process looks like. It's done in two parts. The first is that we're looking to our strategic partners who do job readiness training, the ready to work training kind of approach, conflict resolution. And we'll take their participants and their graduates from that who might be interested in a particular job at DC Water with our contractors, and then we'll match them with those training opportunities. There, either DC Water will run the training cohort itself, or we will work with one of our partners who will deliver the actual skills training. And that can be anything from CDL, which we've done, Class A training, pipe laying training, green infrastructure as part of our MOU with the district, welding we've done as well. Whatever the training that we've decided we're going to run, cohorts that we're going to run, we will take those graduates from the job readiness training and then begin to train them in those requisite skills. One of the things that we've done, and it's part of the evolution of that program, is, we used to run a 30 to 60 day training program. What our contractors told us is, it's just not enough. They need to have some actual experience, some classroom and on the job training experience in order for them to actually get the jobs that we're looking at on the graduation end of the program. And so we have extended our training programs now. Most run, like I said, 10 months, maybe even to a year. So they're getting the necessary classroom training, whatever certifications are applicable to the program, as well as some real-time experience. We also are partnering with the contractors themselves, who will be the employers. So even some of the classroom experience is delivered by those contractors or representatives of the firms. At the end of the training, there is a mock interview session that happens with the various employers. The employers come in and speak, what is an industry day? What does it look like to work with us during those, after you've graduated the program? And then we connect the graduates of the program with the actual jobs. As you can see in step 4, we do have actual goals around graduation and then placement. Excuse me. There is a 60% graduation goal. Right now we're running at about 90%. Very grateful for that. And then we have an 80% placement rate for the graduates, and we're about 100% placement of all of our graduates. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. And so part of what it's also included in this is just the relationship that we have with our contractors, who are the employers. There is language in each solicitation concerning what the expectations are around job training and placement, and them agreeing to support us through the Waterworks program. And so it is certainly something that we are proud of at DC Water, and we're looking to expand that as we look at some of the outline projects that we have relative to some of the major work that we're doing. But certainly any contractor can certainly benefit from the Waterworks program. As we tell everyone, if they have a job need, we've got folk that are ready, willing, and able to do some work, and specifically targeting those hard to place segments in our community. So that's kind of a quick and dirty, a general overview of what Waterworks is. Again, we've placed about 500 people since 2016, and we've probably graduated somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 district residents through our skills training program, and we'll be looking to revamp and restart a lot of it since we're coming out of COVID now, as we're looking into the rest of 22 and 23. So I don't know if there are any questions, or is there anything I can highlight further for your group?
All right, thanks so much. And I can just offer a little bit of testament to what Corey and the team over at DC Water has done with DC Waterworks or DC Works. It has just been a great opportunity for folks to come in and get the training that's applicable to the jobs that are available in the field. It's been a really strong partnership between the industry and actually workforce training. And I think it's a wonderful example of how the city is creating job-ready opportunities for residents. So a big star for what they put together, and maybe this can be a great model for other agencies that are trying to do the same thing, as we are all trying to be creative and how to create more opportunities and make sure that we have the workforce to actually accomplish these opportunities that we are putting forth as projects in the city. So thank you, Corey.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Corey, quick question.
This is, oh,
Yeah,
okay.
no, go ahead.
No, go ahead,
I'll
shoot.
let Victor.
Sorry.
I was just going to ask if this program, I think one of the problems we're running into for the flood side is that, we're not going to need folks until, it's like 1 day a year type thing. Do you run into, is this more of a like long-term program? Like, I'm seeing number 5 contractor hiring, like they get hired by a contractor and have like, a full-time job, or is this also for those kind of like temporary things?
It's a great question. I mean, we're placing folk in service jobs as well as construction, right? And construction is transient by nature. And so, but it's not necessarily we're training for the specific temporary job or whatever the case may be, but we're training and preparing district residents to be employed by the contractor itself. And so what we're finding is, and then we're tracking, just so you know, we are tracking our participants up to a year, in some cases even longer, just to see where they're going. So the idea would be that surely they're performing on a DC Water project, or they're performing with the DC Water contractor, and as their work may be elsewhere, then they're certainly looking for them to go wherever that work may be, and we will follow that participant for as long as we need to. So even in a situation where they've been trained and they're hired, but they're not necessarily busy or active at that point, they can stay with us, and we will continue to place them in other opportunities, so that we just don't have, because what we don't want to do is just train for the sake of training, or to have someone go through that process and still not have a job or not actually earning income. So we'll stay with them and stay with the contractor as well, to ensure that those our participants are being placed and are working.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
So Nick, that was a point of discussion internally here at DC Water with Corey. And what do you do with people who train them for a particular issue like a storm? Or what do they between storms? Which is why it's important to create an opportunity for them to work in different areas, and they may require different types of training as well.
Absolutely.
It's key is to have the workforce available when you need them.
Right. I think the most important thing is to, I'm sorry, go ahead and ask your question, please.
No, this is Corey again. I just want to say that it's, when we're talking about training, it's not just kind of a single item training, that we're training them for multiple tasks, what have you. So
Right.
for our GI training, it's not just to do kind of landscaping, but it's to do operations and it's to do other things, get their CDL so that they can have, to make them even more employable. So we wouldn't just kind of do, kind of one specific type of training.
Right. As usual, Corey, you and I are tracking. The program is great because it's really, the opportunity starts with DC Water's actual contract opportunities, but they get hired by the contractor. So they're not DC Water employees, they are the contractor's employees. And we're creating a work opportunity for that contractor to have a source of new employees. So the sustainable part of this is that they're getting real jobs, but they get to start with a contract that's in place with DC Water, but they continue on with that contractor. So that's the hook, which is it's very successful. So Corey, thank you for that. And if we need to have you back to kind of talk a little bit more about this, we will certainly invite you back. This has been wonderful to hear and share, and we'll have to continue to think creatively about how we can do this for the flood task force needs as a whole. But let's continue to move forward, because now we are at 4 o'clock just about, and we're gonna beg a little bit of time so we can do our closeout and give some homework assignments. So our next slide.
Why don't you skip
gosh, that's right.
why don't you skip the 19?
Did Hannah tell you about?
So the slide 19, which is how to approve 20 plus action plans, at least the one I'm looking at. All right, so just really quick. So what you heard today was you heard a couple things from DISB about potential action plans. But one of them, for example, was the outreach on insurance. And that one, along with two other plans, will be presented on July 20th. So just as a reminder to everybody of kind of the schedule, we are looking at approving these action plans in batches. And the first batch was what we presented on May 18th. It was action plans 1 through 6. And I'm just going to do a quick timeline of what that batch is going to look like. So we presented in May 18th, then we released them for a public comment. Well, not public comment, task force only 1 month comment period, which ends June 18th, so coming up. After that comment period ends, we'll have 2 weeks to make updates, and then we will send it back out to the full task force so that they have 2 weeks to review it in advance of the July 20th meeting. So then on the July 20th meeting, the full task force will be voting on those action plans. And what they're voting is to approve the plans for public comment. So if all of the plans get approved for public comment on July 20th, then those plans will be put on the website, and we'll reach out to resident groups that are interested in this. And we'll give them 1 month to comment on this. After that 1 month period ends, we'll have 2 weeks to make updates, and then we'll send it back out to the full task force so that they have 2 weeks before the September 21st meeting to look at it. And then at the September 21st meeting, if there were any changes, those action plans will come up for vote again. And the final vote at that point will, that will like officially approve that action plan, and it will be a complete action plan as far as the task force is concerned. So it's each action plan has to go through 3 task force meetings. And so that's just 1 batch. And then if you go to the next slide, if we just think broadly about when the final approval occurs. So September 21st will be the final approval of batch 1. And then a month later in November will be the final approval of batch 2. And then January would be the final approval of batch 3. And we've highlighted this in blue because we actually did not plan on having a January 18th meeting. So this is something, this is a heads up to everybody on this meeting, but something that we'll need to put in front of the full task force and ask that this be extended by 1 month. So just a heads up there. And then I think we just move to the closing slides, which is some homework of what our expectations are. So the first item is to continue drafting the action plans. And so for this group, for residential resilience, there are 3 that we're expecting to be presented in July 20th. So the first one we saw presented a little bit earlier, and then DC Water has 2 to present on July 20th. And we've crossed off 1 because, based on some discussion, that'll be rolled in to some of the other action plans that we have. So the second thing is we heard a lot of great stuff on the flood insurance concepts, and so we'd like you to provide feedback. And we'll connect with Philip and DISB after this and see what the best way is to ask for that feedback from this group. But I think we've heard a lot in discussion and seen some in the chat that I think they can work with going forward. And we have some follow-ups, I think, already, for example, with ACMA. But just a heads up that we are looking for feedback there. And then lastly, just a reminder, the third one is to provide feedback by June 18th on the plans that we presented in May. So if we go to the next slide, these are the plans that we're talking about. So our expectation is if you do not have comments by June 18th, that you're good with these action plans as is, and when it comes up for vote on July 20th, that your agency will vote to approve. So that's the expectation. So if you don't feel that way, you need to send us comments so that we can A, make the changes, and B, get the changes back out to the task force in advance. So that is it. And we'll end with the last slide on the upcoming meetings. So we're looking at July 12th for our next meeting with this group, and then task force on July 20th. Back to you, Monty.
Yes, so I just wanted to acknowledge there was a little bit of chat activity. Corey has responded to some of the information that was requested, and we can connect everyone offline. Imania, if you don't mind putting your information in the chat, that way that Corey can follow up with you. So everyone, thank you so much. As usual, these meetings are extremely full of info. Well, they're just detailed, and we have some meetings coming up. We've talked about those dates. The next meeting that we have is governance and coordination. I'm sorry, the full task force, excuse me. And we are moving forward. So if you have not started working on your action plan and you are supposed to be doing that in the near future, please reach out if you need some help. And the A team here, which is DC Water and DOEE, can be assistive because they've already given you examples of how it works. Beyond that, thank you so much. It's 4:05. We appreciate you going over time with us, and we will see you next time. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Well done, DISB, HCMA, ORM, DC Water, DOEE. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Monty. Have a good one.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.